So, welcome to episode 15 of the New England Holstein Association podcast series. The New England Holstein Association is a member association dedicated to encouraging the breeding and raising of registered Holsteins, and this podcast intends to provide resources toward those ends while increasing member connectedness. This episode is sponsored by Farm Credit East. I'm your host, Betsy Bullard of Brigeen Farms, Turner, Maine, and Area 1 Director for Holstein USA. Each podcast will feature one or more members discussing timely topics from breeder perspectives, marketing activities, on-farm technologies and management strategies to youth highlights and numerous things in between. Guests will have homework for each episode, naming an iconic New England cow and or a personal cow icon whose story intertwines with their Holstein experience. Our last episode featured one of our members, Keenan Tygeson of Farmstead Genetics, and the Springfield Showcase Sale at the Northeast All Breed Spring Show in Springfield, Mass. Today's episode, sponsored by Farm Credit East, features two Farm Credit East team members, Emily Syme and Justine Allyn, who also have deep roots in our Holstein activities and shows in New England and beyond. And just to note, Farm Credit East, when we look at their website, is Made in Agriculture, a cooperative owned by the customers it serves. And I thought that was kind of a neat way to encapsulate what Farm Credit kind of is and add a little bit to the two of you's background before I hand it over. Emily currently serves as secretary of the New England Holstein Association, and Justine had a lot of involvement in the Northeast All Breed show, both behind the scenes and serving as one of our judges for showmanship. Thanks again for joining me today for this, and I'm looking forward to an interesting conversation. And whether you two would like to play a rousing game of rock, paper, scissors to decide who goes first, or whoever's quickest on the buzzer here. I'd love to have you tell us a little bit more about yourselves, and then we can kind of launch into the rest of our conversation.
It's great to be here today. My name is Emily Syme, and I grew up showing Holstein dairy cows in 4-H and continue to do so today. I do have a small herd of Holsteins I show under the Windsorville prefix. I'm still living at my family's farm right now in Broadbrook, Connecticut. We're not your traditional farm. We grow ornamental crops, so think Christmas trees, cut flowers, greenhouse crops, that sort of thing. So we have something for every season there. I graduated from UConn in 2023. I was a double major. I did plant and soil science and agriculture resource economics. Once I graduated from UConn, I started right at Farm Credit East, and I've been a loan officer there for the past 3 years now.
Kind of similar path with Emily here. Very excited to be here and represent Farm Credit today. But I've never known a life without the show industry or without Holsteins. My parents started Allendale Holsteins of Canaan, Connecticut back in 1990, around there. So a little bit before my time, but I was born into it and have been showing pretty much ever since. So I started in the show industry, 4-H and everything, pretty much from age 4 and on, and have been very grateful to be pretty successful with it thus far, both here in New England as well as the national, international level. Been breeding and exhibiting cattle at those levels since about age 10 and until my end of my junior career, and looking forward to the next couple years continuing to do it. I graduated from Virginia Tech in May of 2025, and like Emily, started here at Farm Credit very shortly after. It'll be just about a year at the end of June here, and I serve as a loan coordinator. So I get to work very closely with Emily and the other loan officers in the association, and then have a pretty much direct contact with all of the borrowers. And I pretty much followed the loan from application to approval and closing there afterwards. So really get to see every step. Every day is a little bit different, but it's been a really great opportunity so far, and I've enjoyed it.
Excellent. Thank you. You've already both touched on this a bit. Let's try to go a little deeper in this. And you've touched on both of your Holstein experiences thus far. And how do you feel like that shows up career that you find yourself in today?
I think it's definitely the people you meet along the way showing Holsteins, whether that be in 4-H, junior Holstein activities. I can't think of a time where in the workforce, just outside in the organizations I'm a part of, it's just a huge network of people. It's a good network of people, and that definitely has contributed to my working at Farm Credit East.
It's really directed all of my interest. I mean, like I said, I've been doing it for as long as I can remember, and I've never really had many other interests outside of agriculture as a whole. And studying agribusiness at Virginia Tech kind of solidified that and directions of careers and everything. And I think it's a really special industry, whatever sector of agriculture you're in, especially here in the dairy industry, just because everyone is very close-knit, everyone knows everybody, and so the networking, it's pretty easy to kind of start up and build your name out there, which is evidently very beneficial regardless of what step of your career and life you are in.
Justine, that makes a perfect jumping off point for my next thought. We've done several youth-focused episodes and kind of talking about some of our youth programs and talking with some of our junior members. And since you're a little bit newer to this, what pieces of advice would you have for some of our youth members as they kind of navigate through those experiences? And maybe mom and dad are thinking, okay, this is fantastic. Someday they're going to move out of my basement. And these are activities that they're working on that may end up helping them with that.
I just finished off my junior Holstein career pretty recently. Been in the open career, I guess, for going in my second year. And it was very beneficial just to kind of have that growing up. I guess one piece of advice that I would give is don't be afraid to learn. Don't be afraid to ask the questions. I know my dad always, ever since I could remember, was nobody is born knowing how to do anything. And he would always say that to me whenever I felt discouraged or had a bad outing or just had an off day. He was really good at all the pep talks, and that was kind of his famous line. And I think it's really important to remember that regardless of what direction you're going in, what you're trying to do. And especially here in the dairy industry and the show world, is you have to be willing to learn and kind of be willing to talk to people and use your network to ask those questions. And I know it can be intimidating, especially walking down some of the big aisles at Expo, because regardless of how well decorated someone is or how many years they've been doing it, they had to start somewhere. They didn't just start winning junior champion one day. So they've asked the same questions, and you just kind of have to show your interest and show your dedication to learning and be willing to ask those questions to keep progressing.
Emily, how about you? What
Yeah.
additional nuggets of wisdom have you accumulated here?
Yeah, some advice I would give is just take advantage of any opportunity. If you had asked me when I was just starting out in college or even high school what I would be doing as a career, I definitely would not have told you. I'd be working as a loan officer at Farm Credit East. That was not on my radar, but just taking advantage of opportunities that come your way. There's plenty of them in the dairy industry. Taking advantage of those, and it might surprise you, or it might be a learning experience too if it's not the direction you wanted to go down. And I think that ag industry definitely builds that confidence that you can go and take any opportunity that comes your way.
Those are great pieces of advice. So I guess for me, that begs the question, why farm credit? Why is that where you gravitated towards? And what are the things that we, maybe as a casual observer, don't know about what Farm Credit East is and what that looks like being immersed in that network?
Yeah, so my ag interests were all over the place. I said I was a plant science major. I've been showing dairy cows all my life. I really enjoyed my ag economics classes at UConn. So I did an internship with Farm Credit the summer going into my senior year. And that was my first time actually going, sitting at a desk every day, being in an office. It was a great experience to see what goes into that. And I really enjoyed the summer. So, we see that they sponsor shows and all that. I enjoy working for Farm Credit because of their mission. I feel like, yes, we're a financial cooperative, but part of their mission is giving back to the community. And I enjoy working at a company that supports organizations and the community that I am a part of.
Yeah, so kind of similar to Emily's note of not really expecting to be here. Going into my senior year at Virginia Tech, I was on a pretty dead set path of attempting to go to law school, and that had been pretty lofty but lifelong goal of mine was to do something within agriculture law or policy. So talked to a bunch of attorneys, talked to a bunch of people in policy, and they all kind of said, take a break after undergrad before jumping into law school because it's such a big undertaking and just so mentally fatiguing. So prior to my time here, I had interned at a couple firms, and I just knew I wanted to do something within agriculture and something that would be beneficial for both myself, my career, but also the producers all various different types of industries. So I guess farm credit kind of came to me in that way, where I was just on Indeed, on LinkedIn, and we all kind of know that the job industry is a little tricky when you're a fresh post-grad 21 with only a couple internships under your belt, regardless of grades and GPA and all. And so this position was a little bit closer to home for me. So it was an easy transition, and I applied and obviously received the position. And I have enjoyed it immensely, so much more than I ever thought I would. I've learned so much. Not that I didn't learn in the classroom, but so much more just real world practical stuff about mortgages and payment schedules and interest rates and everything. And the thing that I enjoyed probably the most about my specific role is that every day is so different. Some days I'll be going on the farm with Emily and some other officers. Other days I'm working with attorneys for closings and fees and everything. So it's really just a full circle moment of how you kind of apply for a loan to the final product, whether it's a boat that we do or a tractor or an increase of land or whatever it may be. And I also just feel that Farm Credit, as a full association, really takes care of their employees. I mean, the amount of benefits and perks that we get, and also just kind of the relationships that we've built. I mean, I am so close with so many of my coworkers here in this office, as well as all over New York and Maine and everywhere. And I feel like I've really developed some really strong friendships from that. And you just feel like it's a very welcoming place. You can walk down and talk to the CEO whenever you really want. So it doesn't feel like a super hardcore, intense corporate industry. So I think that we try to portray that welcomeness and that networking and familiarity with both ourselves as well as our customers.
Well, it sounds like it's an excellent place to work, and definitely want to join you in recognizing and thanking Farm Credit East for all the support and everything from supporting our youth teams that go to National Convention and trying to defray some of the expenses there, to generously supporting our shows this spring, and even extending to supporting this podcast episode. So that's definitely feels great to have a partner like that in our business. And I wondered a little bit, and Justine, before we actually got to the recording part of this, you had indicated that some of your responsibilities now include some folks even further north than me, which I know for our listeners, that's extremely hard to believe, but there is north of me. There is lots of farming. Tell me a little bit more about what geographical area Farm Credit East encompasses, and whether the two of you have responsibilities in a specific spot, or if you get to interact a little bit more broadly.
Farm Credit spans, or at least Farm Credit East spans all over New England as well as New York and New Jersey. So for me personally, I've worked with a lot of the Connecticut and Massachusetts borrowers that we have here in the Enfield office. And then also Emily did some work, as well as some of our other officers, down in Long Island. So that's been very interesting to me. I've really found some interest there, kind of talking with the oyster farmers and a lot of the vineyards and greenhouses down there. So whenever they're planning a trip, sure to jump on the ferry with them. And then more recently, I've been working with some folks up in northern Maine. So that's been interesting to learn about the potato industry. So really, our office is pretty diverse, where you work with a lot of different industries. Here in Connecticut, there's a lot of tobacco. So that was also very interesting to learn about. Even though I was down south for a couple of years, I didn't really know a whole lot about tobacco until about the past year or so. And then I also kind of help out some of my other loan coordinator friends in other states like Vermont, and also once in a while I'll hop on a maple account or a timber account. So that's the really cool thing, is just the broad information that you learn about agriculture in so many different sectors.
Yeah, when I started working Farm Credit East, I had customers in Long Island, which when you told me there was agriculture in Long Island, it was like, I did not know that, but there is a strong ag industry down there in Long Island. Now I've transitioned over to a lot of Connecticut customers. So I work with a lot of the greenhouse industry in Connecticut. We got tobacco. We have everything sprinkled in there. As you know, New England has very diverse agriculture. And although I'm working with Connecticut customers now, the employees at Farm Credit East that I work with are all spread across the association. So some days I'll be working with our credit analysts who do the underwriting on our loans that sit in the Batavia, New York office, or New Jersey, or as far up as Presque Isle, Maine. So the employees that we're working with, our coworkers, are spread across the association. And I really do enjoy that. You get a different perspective on where they're sitting, the ag industry out there. And it's just great to have so many coworker friends that aren't just sitting in your office. So I really enjoy the day-to-day talking with everybody.
So it's kind of back to that bull piece that you both
Yes.
touched on earlier, and some of your Holstein activities have given you a little bit of a boost on that, and you have had some experiences that have given you a little bit of background in that, and it certainly sounds like it's playing out awfully nicely in your current role. So that's definitely exciting. The next question I had on my handy dandy little outline here suggested, what role do you see Farm Credit East playing with our members? And I think you both kind of touched on that. I mean, it's definitely the role that Farm Credit East plays as a financial partner, and I stress, I guess, the word partner in that statement. If there's more to it that I'm missing, jump in and elaborate, either one of you or both.
Yeah, I think sometimes a bank gets a negative connotation, but I think you got to look at Farm Credit East as not just like a bank, but as a member of your dairy team. I mean, we're just as important as your nutritionist or your crop consultant. If you want to expand or just the every day to day, just consulting work, Farm Credit East is there for the dairy farm.
Well, that's fantastic to learn a bit more about Farm Credit East and about your roles as well. And I don't want you to think that I've forgotten that I had assigned a homework assignment. Emily, I think you started us out earlier, Justine, and this can be two parts. It can be one part. That's entirely up to you. Kind of an iconic cow, either both in your experience or an iconic New England cow separately, and maybe they're the same cow. We've had a few guests that have had the same animal for both. There are no hard and fast rules.
So I have been kind of toying with this question for a little bit and kind of came up with two cows that I think are pretty notable. The first being a New England cow, and the second one that was very influential in my startup career and to this day. For the most iconic New England cow, I would have to say would be MD Delight Durham Attlee. She was purchased as a bred heifer by my parents, Michael Heath and Jason Lloyd, and really kind of jump-started Allendale Holsteins for them, as well as just a very influential cow in the industry to this day. Let's see here. She was All-American as a senior 3, and then that year she was also reserve intermediate champion at World Dairy Expo. They did lose her pretty early on, so she only scored to 92, but her daughters far surpassed all of those scorings, rankings, and sale numbers, topping numerous sales and winning dozens and dozens of classes out at Expo and All-American nominations. I think that she was so influential in the dairy industry as a whole just because of all of her sons that went into Bulls and Stud. I mean, she's the reason why we have sires like Atwood and Aftershock and Avalanche, who then again also produce daughters who are so prominent in the industry today. So I think she was a very pivotal point for the industry, for style, for stature, for dairy quality and strength. And I think that looking back at her photos, she was just such a timeless animal. Regardless of style trends, regardless of judging comments or anything, she was something that would catch your eye every time you walk past the photo or saw her in the ring. So I was fortunate enough to know her as an infant, I guess, and also just kind of have her as a memory and something to look at there in the office with all of the banners, everything. One of her daughters was actually the very first calf I ever led, which was Golden Ariel. I took her to the one and only Jack Brown Fair in the Canaan Congregational Church parking lot when I was 3. So it was kind of a cool startup for me as well, I guess. She went on to be All-American as a junior 2. Let's see, I think that was back in like 2009. So just kind of very influential for New England, for the industry, and then also for our family in general. The second cow that I came to mind was Devon's Lindsay. She was purchased back in the Taste of Ontario sale in 2011, 2012, and was my first 4-H project. She ended up scoring 94 and was 3E, and she really jump-started my personal career. I've bred her and her family line to this day. I have granddaughters and ET calves out of her still that I'm breeding off of, and she had some pretty notable daughters there afterwards. She herself, she was nominated All-American, let's see, back in like 2012 or so. She had a daughter who was also an Aftershock, so that was kind of cool, as bred and known on both sides, who was a 94-point cow, and also had another daughter who was grand of the Northeast All Breeds Fall National a couple years ago and went on to be reserve All-American that year. And like I said, I still have lots of daughters and granddaughters that I'm exhibiting and bringing out and breeding afterwards. So she definitely kind of started my career, and I'm very grateful for her and everything that she's given me.
Emily.
My favorite, took me a minute to think about this, but my favorite iconic cow has to be Whittier Farms Cleavage. She scored excellent 93 3E. Her barn name is Clee because when I had first bought her as a middle schooler, cleavage wasn't the best thing to be calling my animal there. So her name's Clee. I bought her back in 2015 as a few-month-old calf, and she recently just completed her 8th lactation. I remember John Collins and my dad and I drove to Whittier Farms in Mass. One January, I had $1,000 cash in an envelope. She did cost a little more than that. I had to come back with more cash when we picked her up, but she's the foundation cow in my herd of Holstein. She has 2 excellent daughters, another 2 very good daughters. One of them was a class winner at Big E. And this past show season, I was exhibiting her 4th generation calf. So I'm very grateful for everything I've been able to do with Clay. And I think that she just speaks to how deep she's at least 10th generation excellent cow. And she just speaks to just the depth and quality that these New England Holstein farms have. Clee was housed at Milbourne Farm in Granby, Connecticut, and you usually see Milbourne Farms, Dr. Miller's name on those BAA lists that come around. So just the quality and depth that these New England Holstein farms have, and Clee is a testament to that.
Well, thank you both. Those were great stories, and everything from a fair in a parking lot to our envelopes of cash. And it's not every casual conversation we're talking about exchanging envelopes of cash. And so thank you both for those stories, and definitely can see in those stories where the cows kind of intertwine with the people, and those lines continue on through your careers. What have I not asked you at this point that you think would be really important for us to get into this episode?
As a junior Holstein member, you do those quiz bowls, the judging activities, the interview contest, and the knowledge that you gain from those, something you can put on a resume, but you build those soft skills as well. And those are what makes you a well-rounded person. And now working in having an actual career, employers are definitely looking for that. Farm kids come highly recommended because they have that work ethic and that interpersonal skills that you learn growing up on the farm and through Holstein activities.
Thank you. Just having the ability to do exactly what Justine described, and go up to somebody and ask a question and have that level of comfort and that level of connectedness to feel like I can do that. I can ask that person, or I can start that conversation and see where it lands, is a tremendous advantage that it sounds like both of you are utilizing to its fullest. So thanks again for joining me on the podcast today. Thanks again for Farm Credit East and sponsoring this episode. I do need to remind folks a couple of upcoming events. Our National Holstein Convention is June 22nd through the 25th in sunny Florida. The New England Holstein Summer Show is July 7th to the 11th in Lyndonville, Vermont. Find our episode at nesholsteins.com, Spotify, Apple Play, YouTube, wherever you find your favorites, you'll find us. And thanks again for joining us today for episode 15.